Today's video is a deep dive on the Lisa Eldridge MYTH palette. I'm going to be showing you how I did this eye look. I'm going to be doing full swatches of this palette, individual blended out swatches and comparisons with a number of other eyeshadows that I already have in my collection. I'm also going to be testing out how this palette works over top of one of the Lisa Eldridge liquid Lurexes. And then I'll also show you what I used on my cheeks for blush and highlighter and how I did my lips to go with this whole look. Before we get into the video, if you like this video and you'd like to see more from me, I would love to have you subscribe to my channel. I do lots of videos on Lisa Eldridge makeup, as well as tons of other high-end luxury and indie makeup. So if you like that, please consider subscribing to my channel. And now let's get into the MYTH palette. For the individual swatches on this palette, I'm not going to go in the order that these shades appear in the palette. I'm going to try to go more from lightest to darkest because there are some very deep shades here and I don't want any residue from those on my hand to obscure the lighter colors. So we're going to start with the lighter colors for that reason. So starting with the lightest here, this is Illusionism, and this is one of the two top coat shades that Lisa has brought out. I've mentioned before the top coat formula has quite a dry feeling to the touch because it doesn't really have a base. It's just those shimmers and pearls in there. So that's what it looks like on my finger. There it is on my hand. It's really hard to see on my hand. So I think perhaps for this one, it'll be better to just talk about it and see it on the finger because you can see the shade and the dimensionality much better that way. This one is described as a transparent base with ultraviolet sparkly pearls. And I only have one shadow that I want to compare it to. It's the shade Psychedelic in the Natasha Denona Retro palette. So that is Illusionism and that's Psychedelic. So you can see they're quite different. Psychedelic is actually a lot warmer in comparison, even though it still has that kind of silvery reflect. The base of that one is warmer. And you really do see that more ultraviolet in the Illusionism shade. I'm gonna try to swatch some on the back of my hand. So that's Illusionism there. And that's Psychedelic there. I would say Psychedelic also has a bit more of a base than the Illusionism shade. Next up is Mauve Decade, which is a velvet. And this is described as a muted gray lavender. This is one of my favorite shades in the palette. I'm going to compare this to French Gray from the Vega palette. I know they're not similar, but they're both gray shades, so I just want to show how they compare to each other. So there's French Gray, definitely more of a true gray. And I have three other shades to compare. So this one right here, this one that leans a little bit more pinky, is from the Huda Rose Quartz palette, the shade here, which is called Radiate. And then we have Nude Mauve from the Natasha Denona Retro palette. That is that one right there. So you can see that's a bit deeper. And then I think the one that's probably the most similar, but still looks a little bit perhaps more purpley, is actually from the Gucci Gorgeous Flora palette. It's that shade right there. French Gray, the Mauve from the Gucci Gorgeous Flora palette, Nude Mauve from Natasha Denona Retro, and Radiate from Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. Next up we have Faded Amethyst. This is a satin metallic described as a smoky and lustrous taupey amethyst. And I have three comparisons for this one. So this first one here is from, again, the Huda Rose Quartz palette. It's this one right there, which is called Abundance. Then the middle one here is from Natasha Denona Retro. It's the shade Jude. And the bottom one is Babies from the My Dream palette from Natasha Denona. So you can see none of these are really the same. It actually looks on camera like Jude is probably the most similar, but there's a little bit more purple in the Faded Amethyst shade, and it's a little bit lighter as well. And you can see how the Huda formula is a lot more reflective than the Satin Metallic from Lisa. Next, we're going into Victorian Trim, which is another velvet, and it's described as a rich and brown, vibrant mulberry. Just love how smooth these velvets are. And here are my two comparisons for that one. So this is from Natasha Denona Retro. That's the shade right here, which is called Groove. And then this one, which looks very similar, is from the My Dream palette from Natasha Denona. It's the shade Instinct here. And Instinct is a cream to powder formula, so it has quite a similar feel to this velvet formula from Lisa Eldridge, and I struggle to see much of a difference between these two colors. The Natasha Denona is perhaps a little bit more pinky red, but really very, very similar shades there. Next up is Violet Stone, another velvet, and it's described as a pure violet. And I don't have anything really too similar to this one. This one here is another one from the My Dream palette from Natasha Denona. It's the shade Edgy, which looks quite similar in the pan, but actually blends out to be a lot warmer. This middle one here is from Natasha Denona Retro. It's the shade Rebellion. And then the bottom one is again from the Gucci palette, Gorgeous Flora, this deep shade right there. So there you can see all of those. And let's move on to the last shade. And the last shade is Nocturama, which is another velvet described as a deep blackened violet. And that one does feel a little bit drier to the touch than the other velvets, similar to what happened in the Vega palette where the black shade just felt a bit drier. I think that's normal for black pigments. I'm going to compare it to the black in Vega, which is called Lamp Black. This one is a seamless matte, so it's not the same formula as Nocturama. Very interesting to see these next to each other because on its own, you could almost still think that it's a black rather than a blackened violet because it is so deep and dark. And certainly I find that in the pan, it really looks like a black. But when you see it next to the true black of Lamp Black there, you can see definitely that violet influence. And the only shade I'm going to compare that to from another palette is this Blackest Black in the Natasha Denona My Dream palette. And that is of course a true black as well. I feel like Lamp Black comes across a bit lighter and almost kind of grayish on camera because it has that pearl in it. So if I angle it that way, you can see better more the kind of base or true color. And Blackest Black is still just a little bit deeper and more of a rich black color. Here's Myth next to Gorgeous Flora, next to Rose Quartz, My Dream, and Retro. And here's the whole palette swatched. So we have Mauve Decade, Illusionism, Faded Amethyst, Violet Stone, Victorian Trim, and Nocturama. And as far as my favorite shades in this palette, I would go with Mauve Decade. I've been enjoying these lighter to mid-tone mattes in these Lisa Eldridge palettes so much. I just think they really work for my skin tone. They have enough kind of shade and shadow and color to them to have an impact, but they're not so dark that they're going to be overwhelming. And I think they're great for those lighter makeup looks, those kind of everyday makeup looks. So that one, and I really like the velvet formula for that as well. It's just super soft. And then probably Illusionism, because I think that's a really beautiful transformative shade that works very well with not only this palette, but with a lot of the other palettes in this collection as well. So we're going to get into the demo in a moment. I just wanted to quickly talk you through the couple of products that I used in addition to the Myth palette. So I actually started out with the Lisa Eldridge Liquid Lurex in the shade Bianca as my base. I will show myself applying that. I thought this would be a great one to do because it's not too dark, so it wouldn't transform the look too much. It would just kind of change the texture a little bit, but this color works beautifully, obviously, with this palette. You can see these go really well together, and I wanted to test out trying the Lisa Eldridge powder eyeshadows on top of her Liquid Lurex because that is a way that I know a lot of people, including myself, like to use these as a base for other powder eyeshadows. And then the other additional product that I used was this Victoria Beckham liner. This is in the shade Fig. So this is my first time using this one on camera, and it's just the perfect pairing for this palette. So I used this to line my eyes today. And now let's get into the demo of this eye look, and then we'll finish up and I'll show you how I did my cheeks, my lips, and round up my thoughts on this palette. Now for blush and highlighter, I've chosen the Lit Up stick from Westman Atelier in the shade Lit. So this is one that has some kind of pink and purple. It has really multicolored pearl in there, but I thought it would just suit this because it's a little bit more icy and cool toned, and it would go well with this eyeshadow palette and especially with that Illusionism top coat. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this on the tops of my cheeks, maybe a little bit down on the apples, and then I'll go in with the cream blush, which I'll talk about in a second. Then for blush, I'm going to be using this Minori Cream Blush in the shade Orchid. This beautiful kind of pale, cool toned mauve, which I think will be perfect with this palette. For lips, I wasn't really sure what to do, but I'm thinking I'm going to try the Velvet Sorcery with the Sorcery liner and see how that looks. I feel like there are a lot of different directions I could go. I could go with one of the more reddish lips, like I think Lisa did an Instagram post somewhat recently where she did wear the Myth palette with one of her red lips, I think Enchantment maybe. So I could do that, and I do like the look of a red lip with a purple eye, but I wanted to try out Sorcery and just see if it will work. It'll definitely give a different type of effect. So I'm going to go with the lipstick first and then kind of perfect and define with the liner. I think that lip works, so I'm gonna leave it with that, and this is the completed look. So overall, another great experience with this palette, with the Myth palette. I like that all the mattes in here are velvets. I do think they perhaps just blend out a touch more smoothly, and I guess evenly is really the right word. A little bit more evenly than the Seamless Matte formula. I still like the Seamless Mattes, but I just find that the velvets are really great for even coverage and application. One thing that I might like to see in this palette that we don't have would be a light pink satin metallic. So we have this very light pink top coat here with Illusionism, but this doesn't have much pigment of its own. It doesn't really have a base to it, so it really does just work as a top coat. But I would love to see a satin or metallic in this type of a color as well in here, because I think that would just help to be able to bring more variety to this palette and the looks that you can do with it. So like for the kind of halo eye that I did today, I like how it turned out, but I think it would have been nice to have a light pink metallic with a more opaque base that I could actually use in the center to really bring that highlighted effect to any part of the eye, depending on the look that you're doing with it. So that's kind of the one thing that I felt like was perhaps missing from this. And of course that would mean replacing one of the other shades. And I think probably I would replace either this very deep blackened violet, that one's Nocturama, or this violet stone one. Those are both very deep purpley tones, and it would be either one of those I think that I would sacrifice in favor of a lighter pink metallic. If I were to do that with one of the shades from the other Lisa Eldridge palettes, it would probably be this one here from the Muse palette, which is called Taffeta Fan. So that's the Luster formula. It has a little bit of a softer base color to it. Or this one here from the Vega palette, which is Supernova. So I've got them on my fingers there. I'm just going to swatch them and kind of see how I feel like those would fit. Probably Supernova would be the best fit. And Supernova is a luminous formula. So there aren't really any light pink metallic / satin shades in the Lisa Eldridge palette. So I still feel like there's room for something like that, for her to come out with something like that in the future. That could work really nicely in the Myth palette. But otherwise, I think this is a beautiful palette, and it is great that you can kind of mix and match at your will and switch things out if you feel like something else would work better for you. And also, of course, that you can actually buy the shades individually, so you wouldn't have to buy a full palette just for one shade if you wanted to replace something in this palette or any of the other palettes. I like that we have this warmer purple here in addition to the cooler deep purples there. I think this metallic is really pretty. This is another one. I think like all of these satin metallics in these palettes would be really good for one and dones, for very, very simple looks, because a lot of them have enough depth that they're going to bring you shadow and definition in the crease, but they're not going to be too dark that it's overwhelming over the whole lid. So I do like that formula, and I think that's one of the best ways that they can probably be used. So for now, that's all I have to say about the MYTH palette. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful for you. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below. I always love to see those. And if you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd love for you to do so. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video.